Thank you very much, Hans. And as far as age goes, this is still a child, I think, in terms of an initiative. And it's a bit different from the other ones that you'll be hearing about, as I will get into in a moment. But I'd like to preface the presentation by actually posing a few questions because it speaks to how we created this initiative in the first place. And it talks about elements of an effective approach to international regulatory cooperation and the need to be clear on what you want to achieve with who or whom and why. And really, this speaks to the fact that sometimes you can devote a lot of resources and energy to something and it leads to nothing. So you really have to establish the business case before you go down a particular road and see that something will be achievable. Develop a strategy on or a roadmap on how to achieve desired outcomes if you think that this is a good thing to proceed with. And finally, be practical. Stepwise approach, taking account of what already exists, what's already going on within the region and internationally. So an example of that, we hope, is APEC. And APEC stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It was created in 1989. It was an idea of former Prime Minister of Australia. It is now 21 member economies, which account for 40% of the world population, 54% of GDP, and 44% of world trade. So we're talking about Russia, Japan, China, US, Korea, etc., Australia, some really big players. And then you have a lot of smaller players as well. The goals overall is to promote trade, sustainable economic growth and prosperity of member economies. And we use the word economies rather than countries because there's some parties that are not countries within APEC, through policy alignment and economic and technical cooperation. Now, I have technical cooperation bolded here because that's the area within which we're working. The APEC agenda and the annual work plan are developed around senior officials meetings. There's typically 3 in a given year, culminating in a leaders' declaration. So in November of the year, you would see President Obama and the leaders of other APEC nations in a photo op, and they're endorsing policy and setting the agenda for the subsequent year. The chair of APEC rotates annually. It was the US in 2011, Russia last year, and this year, Indonesia. And in color, again, just depicts the enormous geographic expanse of the APEC region from the tip of South America all the way to New Zealand. Now, within APEC, it's a very, very complex organization, and there's upwards of 40 different task force, committee, working groups, etc., dealing with investment banking, telecommunications, you name it, food safety. But the one that I'm going to be talking about that is germane to this conversation is the Life Sciences Innovation Forum. And this was created following an endorsement by APEC leaders in 2002 in Los Cabos, Mexico. And it recognized the importance of life sciences innovation in promoting public health and economic health. Here, the idea being you have a healthy population, you can have a healthy economy. And from the outset, harmonization was seen as a prerequisite to fostering innovation for obviously clear reasons. Now, the Life Sciences Innovation Forum is rather unique in that it, unlike other harmonization initiatives, regional or international, doesn't produce harmonized guidances. Rather, it promotes the use of existing international guidances and best practices. And there are some interesting features of APEC, the ability, number one, to access APEC funds to advance projects. So there's a pot of money every year that's made available in 3 funding cycles to put forward project proposals. This could be seen as seed money, but it's very important to actually be able to undertake projects. The fact that APEC proceeds on a voluntary basis, which ensures the coalition, as James put it, of the willing, the participation of those economies interested and committed to cooperation in a particular area. So we're not trying to move 21 economies forward at the same time, but those are interested are welcome to participate. It's rather unique in that it has a tripartite structure and complementary roles played by government in the form of regulators, industry, and academia. Now, formed in 2002, sponsored a number of workshops aimed at promoting international standards and best practices, as I mentioned, but efforts were not coordinated. So we had individual economies putting projects, proposals forward, and there was a growing recognition that a different approach was necessary to promote convergence. So standalone workshops, individual projects from various economies aren't going to make the type of change that we felt was needed. So that turned around when Peru was chair of APEC in 2008, and discussions there led to the creation of two things. One, the Regulatory Harmonization Steering Committee that I chair, and the APEC Harmonization Center, and they were both inaugurated in June 2009 around a very successful multi-regional clinical trial workshop. The mandate of the RHSC is to promote a more strategic, effective, and sustainable approach to harmonization by proactively identifying and prioritizing projects seen to be of greatest value to regulators and to the regulated industry. By strengthening linkages with harmonization initiatives, both regionally and internationally, training organizations and other key players such as the WHO to promote complementary actions and most effective use of resources. So when I was talking about interconnectivity this morning between initiatives, this is what APEC is about. Products of interest, medical products, notably pharmaceuticals, including biologics, and medical devices, but now also advanced therapies, and we are getting into the area of cell and tissue therapies. Members, growing number of regulators from the APEC economies, and you see here a growing list of regulators that are part of this and senior representatives from those regulatory authorities that are in a position to make decisions. As well, interestingly, perhaps the first time globally this has been done, we've formed industry coalitions. So, for example, it isn't pharma, it isn't JPMA, it's a research-based pharmaceutical sector industry coalition. Same thing for medical devices, generic pharmaceutical sector, and recently the biotech products sector. As well, the director of the APEC Harmonization Center, which is an APEC-wide resource to enhance and sustain regulatory convergence and capacity building efforts. This is a resource to the tune of about $500,000 by the government of Korea every year. It is located in Seoul, Korea, and it is indeed an APEC-wide resource and has been instrumental in supporting international workshops and projects that are of interest to the APEC region. Linkages also very important. I mentioned again, interconnectivity, establishment of official liaisons with international harmonization initiatives and in organizations, including the Asian Harmonization Working Party on the device side, ICH, been part of that since 2004. The newly formed equivalent to ICH on the device side, IMDRF, PANDRA, will be submitting an official observership request. WHO, European Medicines Agency, EDQM, USP, etc. And this reflects the position that APEC should act as a catalyst for international action on issues that demand a global approach, such as supply chain integrity. But again, looking at this strategically, we said we have to develop a framework, a policy framework, which we did. The framework outlines a strategic multi-year approach for achieving greater regulatory convergence by 2020, describes guiding principles and a general multi-step approach to achieving that end goal, talks about voluntary action. Each economy proceeds at its own pace. This becomes very important because if the bar is too high, then certain economies might decide, I'm going to pull out. We don't want that. It includes the first definition that I'm aware of regulatory convergence that has now been adopted in two other international initiatives, appendices for pharmaceuticals and medical devices, and suggested indicators of success. This was endorsed by APEC ministers in November of 2011. And this is really what it's all about. Starting with a strategic framework, coordinated approach to promote regulatory convergence, setting goals. Then we've identified a number of priority work areas through needs assessment from diagnostic workshops, surveys, and expert opinion. And that has led to the development of roadmaps in each of these priority work areas, how to get from A to B to support the strategic objectives. So every project now must support the roadmaps, and that must in turn support overall goals. So we are moving away from ad hoc or individual actions to collective efforts. The priority work areas and the champion economies that are the leads for this, multi-regional clinical trials being the first one championed by MHLW and PMD of Japan. Secondly, also extremely important, global product quality, covering both medical devices and pharmaceuticals and supply chain integrity. The U.S. is the lead on this. Good review practices and combination products, Chinese Taipei, biotech products, including biosimilars, but also the innovator's product, and pharmacovigilance, Korea, good clinical practice, inspection, Thailand, and most recently, a roadmap submitted in Jakarta 2 weeks ago by Health Sciences Authority of Singapore, also working with US FDA on this on cellular therapies. So I'll end with this and say that it kind of positions our strategic thinking. If we take pharmaceuticals as an example, we've got on the left-hand side here the Standards Development Organization, ICH. The interface, which we just heard from Tominaga-san, is the Global Cooperation Group and the ICH Regulators Forum. Here we see that the GCG has, in fact, a number of regional harmonization initiatives from around the world and drug regulatory authorities also from around the world. APEC, however, can play this enabling role, supporting the uptake and a better understanding of international standards and best practices through our strategic approaches and also through the APEC Harmonization Center. I'll just say quickly that on 3 of those roadmaps 2 weeks ago, we're talking about forming a Center of Excellence for Multi-Regional Clinical Trials located in the APEC region, piloting that, then moving towards a virtual network with other institutions, including, we've been discussing this with Rebecca Lee of the Harvard MRCT Center of Excellence, but there are others as well. Global supply chain integrity, not duplicating the work of the multi-state mechanism, but in fact taking account of that. We've got $500,000 over 5 years of APEC money, so this is very exciting, and we have even participation from Africa on this. We are also looking at some very interesting developments on good review practices and how this can be sustained and become something very important, I think, not only within the APEC region, but globally. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's now my pleasure to introduce the 4th speaker, Margaret Ndomondo Sigonda, who used to be the chief regulator of Tanzania for many years and moved to Johannesburg, where she's now the pharmaceutical coordinator of the NEPAD program, which is helping and supporting and planning and looking at many African regulatory harmonization programs.